back to another episode of Law Schoolers. In our last episode, we started introducing perfection. In this episode, we are going to be continuing our discussion of perfection. Last episode, we focused on the essential content of the financing statement. Just as a little bit of review of those essential terms, you need to have the name of the debtor. That's probably the most important part of the financing statement, and the reason for that is because the name of the debtor is what you're actually going to search if you're looking for the financing statement. The other essential terms of the financing statement, though, is going to be the name of the secured party and an indication of the collateral. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about the other content that is included in the financing statement, and what I mean by the other content is just what's the role that the filing office has. If the filing office makes an error, what happens to the financing statement there? We'll also talk about how to file a financing statement just based off of how Article 9 sets up the rules for that. We're not actually going to walk through, go into the website, submitting the financing statement, whatever else it might be. And then I also want to talk about other filings that are related to the financing statement, even though it isn't part of the financing statement. So these are going to be amendments and then also continuation statements. So let's go ahead and hop into this material. Well, the role of the filing office and errors that they're going to make, these are going to be outlined in Article 9, Sections 9516 through 9520. So if my math is right, that's 5 sections, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Yep, 5 sections. Cool. And essentially what we learn from these sections is that once a filing statement is going to be sent to the filing office and the fee is paid, it is the responsibility of the filing office to index the statement. Some of the responsibilities of the filing office is going to include filing the statement within 2 days after it has been received. Another responsibility that they have is responding to search requests within 2 days. The third responsibility that they have is rejecting filing statements based on incomplete fields. This is not going to be based on the quality or the correctness of the statement. It's just going to be measured for incompleteness. And what is going to be the incomplete areas that they're going to be looking for? Well, they're going to be looking at the address of the secured party. They're going to be looking at the address of the debtor. And they're going to be looking at whether or not the debtor is an individual or an entity. So those are going to be the things that they're looking for: completeness, not accuracy or correctness, because the filing office is not supposed to do any legal interpretation. Their whole role is just, is this filing statement correctly filled out? And if it is, then I'm going to file it. And then one last responsibility that they have is that they are supposed to assign each statement a number, so any amendments can be easily traced back to the original statement. So what happens if the filing office makes an error in doing one of these things? Say that they check for quality or correctness when they shouldn't have checked for quality and correctness, and because of that, they end up rejecting the financing statement. Well, if they make an error in one of those responsibilities, the error is not going to affect the effectiveness of the financing statement. But some of the errors of the filing office regarding rejection may still affect priority. So it won't affect your perfection in it, but it may end up affecting your priority. We won't get into the details of which errors affect priority. Maybe we will when we talk about priority, but as far as our discussion now, not related, so we're not going to talk about that right now. So that's the role of the filing office, and what happens if the filing office makes an error, whether they should have rejected and they didn't reject, or if they rejected when they shouldn't have rejected. Okay, so let's talk about how to file a financing statement. There's really 2 parts of this that I want to talk about. You need to have the authority to file, and then where are you going to file the financing statement? Well, the authority to file is set out in Section 9509 of the UCC. And it just basically says is that the filing of the original statement by the secured parties must be authorized by the debtor. I mean, that's really straightforward. The debtor needs to say, yes, this is my property, my collateral. I am authorizing you to file this financing statement to give yourself perfection, to put it in priority, and anything else that goes along with that. The security agreement that is signed by the debtor at the very beginning, so you know how for attachment you need to have an authenticated agreement. Well, that security agreement is that authenticated agreement, and that is going to count as the debtor giving authority to file the financing statement. This is what is called ipso facto authorization. Any amendments to the financing statement also needs to be authorized by the secured party. Any amendments will need to be authorized by the secured party, not the debtor. And the reason for that is because the amendments to the financing statement is going to affect what the secured party has priority for within the collateral. Okay, so that's the authority to file. Filing of original financing statement, authorized by the debtor. Amendments, authorized by the secured party. Okay, and then where to file. This is outlined in Section 9501 of the UCC. And it just basically is really straightforward about where the financing statement needs to be filed. It's going to be filed with the Secretary of State in that office, which is generally considered a centralized office. Now, the state matters. The filing needs to occur in the state where the debtor is located. So there's going to be some amendments that are going to need to be filed if the debtor moves states. But the original financing statement needs to be filed at the location where the debtor is located. And again, this makes sense because if you're dealing with a debtor, you're going to assume that the debtor lives in that state. And so any searches that a potential creditor is going to be looking for, they're going to look in the Secretary of Office state of the state where the debtor is located. So that's why the state where the original financing statement needs to be done is where the debtor is located. Okay, so those are 1 and 2 of the things I wanted to talk about, the role of the filing office, and then also how to file a financing statement. Now I want to talk about some of the other filings of related to the financing statement. These are going to be outlined in Section 9512, which really just lists the different types of other filings. I want to start with continuation statements. A continuation statement is going to be described in Section 9515, and let's just talk about how long a financing statement is good for. A financing statement is good for 5 years, and it's going to expire at the end of those 5 years unless if a continuation statement is filed. Well, what is a continuation statement? A continuation statement is just a document that's filed saying, hey, our perfection continues in this collateral described, or rather indicated in this financing statement, and it will continue for another 5 years. So financing statement lasts for 5 years. If you have a continuation statement, it lasts for an additional 5 years. You can do that for however long you want, as long as you have no gaps. Well, then your perfection and your priority is not going to be adjusted. A continuation statement can be filed as early as 6 months before the original statement is set to expire, but it needs to be filed before the original statement expires. What happens if there is a gap, meaning the original financing statement expires and then there's a gap, and then you try and file a continuation statement? Well, there's going to be a lack of perfection. It's going to be as if you were never perfected in that original collateral, even back to that original date of the financing statement. That means it'll be as if you're never perfected, and you will lose your priority in line. You'll lose your spot in line. It's as if you stepped out of line. Imagine you're at an amusement park, You standing in line, you step out of line, the person behind you steps forward to take your spot. That's what happens if you have a gap in your financing statement and your continuation statement. So just to summarize what a continuation statement is, financing statement expires after 5 years. Continuation statements need to be filed to extend that for another 5 years, and the continuation statement can be filed as early as 6 months before the original statement will expire. A gap in that will result in you losing your spot in line. So what are some of the other amendments that can be made to the financing statement? Well, you can terminate the financing statement. You can change the name of the debtor, the secured party. You can change addresses. You can add or remove collateral from the financing statement, or you can assign the financing statement to a new secured party. Once again, though, these amendments need to be approved by the secured party before they are actually going into effect. And this makes sense. You don't want the debtor terminating the financing statement because the debtor does not have that same interest in the collateral as the secured party does. You don't want a different secured party coming in and terminating the financing statement. If the financing statement is going to be terminated, you want the owner of that financing statement to be the one to terminate that. Same thing with the other amendments as well. And that's why that authorization is going to be important when it comes to filing financing statements and then also other filings. Okay, well, that's everything I had to talk about as far as the other content of the financing statement. This episode, we talked about the role of the filing office, some of their responsibilities, and what happens if those responsibilities are not satisfied. We talked about how to file a financing statement, namely who has the authority to file and where the financing statement needs to be filed. And then we talked about other types of filings related to the financing statement. Those are continuation statements primarily, which is important for priority reasons. And then we also talked about other amendments which needs to be approved or authorized by the secured party. These include termination, changes of addresses, adding or removing collateral, and then assigning a new secured party to that collateral within the financing statement. So that's all the material we have for financing statement. In our next episode, we will be discussing other perfection methods, such as different filing systems, possession controls, and so forth. The things that we talked about yesterday at least gave a bird's eye overview yesterday of that material. Well, that's all the material I have for you guys today. Thanks for tuning in, and I will talk to you all later. Have a good one. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Law Schoolers Podcast. If you enjoyed the show or the material shared on the Law Schoolers website, you can support Law Schoolers by becoming a patron at patreon.com/lawschoolers. I also wanted to provide a quick disclaimer. Nearly all Law Schoolers material is unedited due to the sake of time and a desire to keep the content as raw as possible. Additionally, the material is only provided for educational purposes and is not to be used as legal advice. If the material is used as legal advice, Law Schoolers is not liable for any legal outcomes. Thank you again for enjoying the show.